Hey, welcome to another episode of Table Ready Gaming. I'm your host Dave, and today we're going to have some fun with magnets. Specifically show you how you can use them to store your miniatures and get some more use out of model kits that allow you to build different units, add some modularity to your collection. Anyhow, Lilu and I are excited that you're attending, and we need to do the quick YouTuber plea and ask you to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and push the notification bell if you're enjoying today's content. Anyhow, before we go any further, I just wanted to let you know that everything in this tutorial is going to be time-stamped down below, so it doesn't matter if you're new to the hobby or you're a long-time collector. Hopefully you'll find little tips to help you along the way. Lastly, before we get started, today's episode is going to be sponsored by TotalElement.com, and more on them later. But let's get down the hobby bench and we'll get this thing started. So if you're interested in starting to use magnets with your collection, here's a few tools I suggest you pick up. A pin vise for drilling out holes, a Sharpie for marking polarity on magnets, magnets, as it turns out they're an important part of magnetizing miniatures, hot glue, and a hot glue gun, wax paper, tape, super glue, and accelerant, green stuff, because when you're drilling, I doubt your holes will be perfect, and sometimes we just need to fudge the results, a bottle of paint. Any color will do, but I personally prefer something bright and easy to see. And here's a few additional tools that aren't required, but they do make life easier. A magnetic baking sheet. This is especially helpful when magnetizing bases. A Dremel, because I have feeble weak hands, and I'm also incredibly impatient. And lastly, a flux polarity guiding set. Wait, what? Flux polarity guiding set. Search on Home Depot. Nothing. So, one of the biggest things I struggle with when magnetizing miniatures is sometimes I'll get the polarities mixed up. And so this causes things to go shooting off into oblivion instead of connecting nicely to the finished model. This is just a little tool that I invented, patent pending, that will help you with this and just kind of keep that polarities all aligned. So I'll show you how we build it in just a second. So you start with a mechanical pencil. I'm a big fan of these because when you remove the eraser bit here, it's a nice area to place a magnet. I would also probably recommend taking the lead or graphite out, but I guess you could leave it in if you wanted to. So once you have the pencil all taken apart, then you just need to take some green stuff and kind of just wad it down into the top where the eraser normally would go. I follow this with a magnet. And then I just kind of douse everything with super glue for good measure and wait for it all to harden up. Then you just do these steps again on the second pencil, but with the magnet polarity facing the opposite way. You could, if you wanted to, add even a smaller magnet to the other side by rolling out a sausage of green stuff and then sticking the magnet down into that. And then again, I would apply some more super glue and let it dry. So lastly, I label one pencil A and the other pencil B. And in my mind, what this stands for is B is the base or the large part of the miniature, and A is the accessory or the thing that we're attaching to the miniature. So A's always attached to B's, and that way I know that every miniature in the model will have the accessory click on it and all the polarities will be lined up. Because this lets me have all the accessories together for a unit rather than having to be like, okay, this is Dwarf A's arms and heads and everything, and this is Dwarf B's arms and head, because that sounds like a whole nother level of organizational hell that, quite frankly, I'm not equipped to handle. Right, so probably the most clever thing I have done in this hobby is starting to use magnets to store my collections when I take my miniatures out to travel or just to keep my finished products looking good. I have originally started with the whole shoebox, and then I think I upgraded to an egg carton, and then I tried the battle foam, but by far magnetizing the miniatures to something is the best way to store miniatures in my opinion. Not only is it more affordable, but it also cuts down on the overall footprint of the collection and lets you fit more into a smaller space. I have in the past talked about how You can take a paper box and make it into a friendly miniature transportation case. It's one of my older videos, and you can see it up here. I'm going to probably be revisiting this project here soon, so make sure you subscribe so that you can see that video when it comes out. So I find it easiest to put the magnets in the base first before you do anything else. And quite honestly, this has kind of become my I'm tired and I don't want to do anything tonight project, but I still want to feel somewhat productive. I'll just pre-magnetize a bunch of bases. So to get this project started, basically all I do is I take my metal baking sheet, I put all the bases face down, and then I just apply magnets to the underside of them. Personally, I'm a fan of 2 small magnets rather than 1 big one. I feel like this gives a more secure fitting to the storage compartment. Also, the 2 small magnets allows you to put one on each side of a slotted base, and with a little bit of more foresight and planning, they won't get in the way of pinning wire or anything you would have to use to attach a heavier model to the base. Lastly, on larger bases, you can easily add 3 or 4 of these magnets around the base to give it a really strong connection. So once I got all the magnets in each base, I then just take a little bit of super glue and put it over each magnet and let it dry. I don't even bother with accelerant because it's attached to the baking sheet, so those magnets aren't going anywhere. I'll just fill the entire base up with some hot glue, and then I just flip it over and push it hard against a piece of wax paper. Then the excess hot glue just runs out the side. Once it dries, you just peel it off the wax paper, and with an X-Acto blade or a sharp knife, you can just trim the sides of that excess hot glue off the side of the base. So a few other benefits of the hot glue is not only does it keep that magnet permanently in place, it also provides a nice rubber texture to the underside of the base. I find this stops the miniatures from moving around or sliding around on things like battle mats and stuff like that. So that was an unplanned advantage. And then also it adds a little bit more weight to the miniature and helps them kind of stand up better. Right, so my last 2 tips about using magnets to store your miniatures is, first, when you remove the miniature from your storage case, make sure you're always grabbing the miniature by the base and pulling there. These magnets are surprisingly strong, and I've actually removed miniatures from their base before the base itself comes out of the storage tray. So my second piece of advice about using magnets in your miniature bases is just carry a box of washers with you in your bag. You can use these to add some extra weight on the fly to the miniature if they start falling over or you have some polarity issues and they're pushing each other apart. And another benefit of adding magnets to the miniature's base, and why I do it first, is because it lets me then easily click these miniatures onto my homemade paint stands, which is basically just a piece of PVC pipe with a metal washer glued to the top. There's nothing too fancy about them. I personally found that once I started adding magnets to the underside of my miniatures bases, I was finding all kinds of unique uses for my miniatures. So I definitely think it's easiest to add a magnet to the base as the first step. But if you already have a collection of miniatures and you're like, man, that looks like a great way to store my collection, don't feel like it's too late and you gotta rip all the miniatures off the base and start over or anything insane like that. You can absolutely add a magnet as the last step in the miniature building process, and with this hot glue technique, you'll still get great results. So it's entirely up to you if you want to do this first or last. So I'd like to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, TotalElement.com. I have been a longtime customer of TotalElement.com. I've always had really good luck finding the magnets I want. Their product selection is second to none. The pricing seems to be extremely reasonable, and their customer service is outstanding. Every order I've placed with them has been arrived in a very timely manner and has been complete. I think viewing their websites, their product descriptions are very well done. It's very clear to see what magnets you're ordering, how big you're getting, and exactly what to expect from your final order. So when I sat down to make today's video, I wanted to reach out to them to see if I could offer a little special thank you to you, my viewer. I was very happy that Total Element agreed to help me out with this. First off, they provided all the dwarves you see in today's video, so we had something kind of fun to build. They provided all the magnets you see in today's video, and lastly, they're offering 10% off to any subscriber who uses Table Ready Gaming promo code in their order. So make sure you click on the link down below to take advantage of that. Lastly, any order you place from TotalElement.com, $10 or more qualifies for free shipping. So that's something to take advantage of as well. Anyhow, I just wanted to thank Total Element today for sponsoring YouTubers. Now, back to the video. So the first thing I do when I want to magnetize a new infantry model, or a new like man-sized or dwarf-sized model in this case, is I first look at the miniature and I try to decide what needs to be removable and interchangeable and what can be glued to the miniature. My original plan with these dwarves was that I was going to try to have a less is more approach and glue the Iron Breaker head on permanently with the shoulder pads, and so that way only the Iron Breaker arms and the Iron Drake arms would, you know, swap in and out, so I could run them as Iron Breakers or Iron Drakes. However, that being said, when I started dry fitting these guys together, I realized the Iron Breaker's head doesn't allow the Iron Drake arms to fit to the miniature. This was really frustrating, but you know, whatever. I could have switched this up by putting the Iron Drake head on permanently and then had the Iron Breaker arms attach and remove, but frankly, I just don't think that Iron Drake head has enough beard to go all out, and I decided to have that head come off as well. Anyhow, in the end, it all clicked together really well. I think these guys look great, and I've been very happy with them. But I do think when you start magnetizing miniatures, you can get a little carried away with all the accessories that can be interchangeable. And at the end of the day, you really need to think about what's going to be noticeable on the table and what needs to change so that your opponent in a game can easily understand what each unit is on the tabletop. So now that I knew what I was going to do with these models, I decided to start the sub-assembly. For these dwarves, I assembled them into 4 parts: the body, the head, and the 2 arms. I also decided to glue the shoulder pads onto the body rather than the arms because this helped hide the seam between the arms and the body if the magnets aren't completely flush. Plus, this allowed both my Iron Drakes and my Iron Breakers to be fully armored. Now, once you realize how this miniature would go together, you might need to file down the original connection points, especially if it's a ball joint, as this won't give you a clean area to attach the magnets. You may even need to build up the connection point with a bit of green stuff, but this will most likely be hidden from view, so your sculpting hardly has to be clean or professional. Once you have your connection points ready to go, you'll want to dab a small bit of paint on one end of the accessory bit and then dry fit it into the base bit. This will leave a small dot of paint on both pieces, showing you exactly where the hole needs to be drilled for your magnet. Then, it's as simple as inserting your magnet into the drilled out hole and using super glue to hold it in place. Just make sure you mark the polarity of your magnets, and this can be done with a Sharpie, and this is personally where I find my guiding tool to be exceptionally useful. I always use glue to hold my magnets in place, even if I'm pushing them into uncured green stuff, as I find the glue is a more surefire way to keep these miniatures together. Lastly, if you're connecting a really small bit and you want it to be removable, you can simply drill a hole in the bit and insert a bit of paperclip wire, then snip off the excess wire and file the connection point flat. This is a great way to attach small bits without having to worry about polarity. But don't expect the same strength as connecting 2 magnets. Now, infantry is hardly the only thing you can magnetize. These magnets are definitely strong enough to hold even vehicle accessories together. Now, if I had paid closer attention when assembling this, I would have realized that GW has changed the assembly instructions for the gyrocopter and gyro bomber and the box set that I got here. And so I accidentally glued the back of the bomber onto the front, but these magnets would absolutely be strong enough that if I wanted to, I could clip this whole backside off and switch this between being a gyro bomber and a gyrocopter. Instead, we just had to settle with like simple weapon accessories and having the blades spin, which gives me more joy than I would honestly like to admit. Oh, and also the flying stand. So, you know. As we all know, these plastic stands aren't the most durable of plastics. So I find magnetically attaching the flyer allows it to come off easier for transport and storage. And like me, and you feel like a black flight stand just looks way better than clear, you can simply remove the flight stick altogether and replace it with a magnetic nail. Also, for added air quote realism, you can apply one of these ball and circle magnets to the flight base, so your model will be able to make sweet banking maneuvers on the tabletop. Again, this is silly, but I quite enjoy it. So we're gonna get to those final shots in just a moment. But today's video is only scratching the surface of what we can do with magnets. I see magnets used to great effect in terrain building, adding wound counters to multi-wound models, and even like connecting to things like movement trays and stuff like that. So magnets can do a lot beyond simple like storage solutions and switching out accessories and whatnot. And at the end of the day, magnets can even add modularity to even larger kits to save even more of those precious hobby dollars. Oh, and if you're wondering why I didn't finish the bases on these dwarves, well, let's just say these bases might be temporary as I'm going down a bit of a new hobby rabbit hole. Well, I'm Dave, goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy hobbying!